What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another Tournament After Reaction Report. As always, it is me, Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going to be talking about the most recent GT that I went to, the California Team Championships, hosted by Dicehammer in sunny Southern California, just like about a mile away from Disneyland. I was the captain of Team Nobhammer. It was a team that we put together off of. I'm part of like the greater club that I play with is called Githammer, and I was able to select the people that I wanted to be on my team in order to try and have the best shot of doing well with a certain roster. And overall, we're very happy with how we did. But today I'm going to be taking you through all the games that I played, going through some of the things that we actually, things that are potentially learning moments from the games that I had. And then later on this week, I believe I'm going to be getting into a chat with the other Githammer captains, and we're going to be going ahead and talking about like the event as a whole, things we liked, things we didn't like, pairings, and blah blah blah, and go from there. You'll see that I am probably the most like data driven of the captains, and so we'll go ahead and talk about that as well as we get through this. So a little bit of preface about the team that I put together. Like I said, I was able to pick out the members of Githammer that I wanted to be on my team, and overall, we put together a team that was the seventh highest average elo of all the teams that were actually going to be at this event. I was playing with my buddy Alejandro, playing World Eaters. I had Michael, who was playing Crusher Stampede Tyranids, Tomas playing Imperial Knights with Canis and a bunch of small knights, my roommate Ben, who was playing Retaliation Cadre Tau, and I was playing Bridgehead Guard. And just a general like understanding of the way that we were going into this was we were expecting to have World Eaters, who was playing a very offbeat Vessels of Wrath list, as kind of their own thing, and then we were going to generally go in with two general pairings to try and pinch certain matchups. The first pairing we had was Crusher Stampede Tyranids plus Imperial Knights, which is just a T10. Both of them are fairly skewed into being very durable. They have decent shooting, they have some melee as well, and we can generally use this to pinch anything that can't deal with that amount of durability. The other pair that we were looking at was Retaliation Cadre Tau and Bridgehead Guard, and both of these are relatively like they're a lot lighter. I had something like I want to say 150-ish models in my guard army, and then of course the retaliation cadre is mostly toughness 5-ish models, and then you have some Kroot, and then I think you had a couple of Riptides. But these were generally going to be hunting after things that were middling toughness as well. They had really good matchups into, anything with a couple of Death Stars. If there's just like one or two things that need to die, our armies are really good at dealing with that. The Bridgehead was better at going after like marine bodies, so like Deathwing Bikes or something like that, whereas Retaliation Cadre had the Sun Forgers that'll just absolutely demolish any single entity on the other side. So having these two armies just be really mobile and be able to force a lot of action on the map in favorable engagements means that we had these two pairs that could really hunt after a lot of different opposing armies. And that was the general idea. So in our first round, we ended up playing into Barely Battle Ready Tactical Yeet, and they were awesome. I really enjoyed playing up against them, and I had the pleasure of playing up against Chuck and his Adeptus Custodes and the Talons of the Emperor Detachment. In round one, we were playing Mission A, which was Tipping Point, Raise Banners, and Take and Hold. Some very, very basic 40k. And we were playing it on his table choice, which was this WTC map. Now, in my projections in my matrix that I put together, I had said that in general, going into Custodes, I should probably be looking at a 12 in most situations. However, I was a little bit worried when I saw that we were actually going to be playing on this one on Take and Hold. And the main reason for that is there's this triangle here that is very hard to attack, right? I really rely on having opportunities to 6-inch deep strike on people, but if you have like a model like here, here, and like here, I I can't get to this pretty much at all. I might be able to drop a couple of guys in here such that they're 6 inches away, but as long as there's other people here, it's going to be really hard for me to actually get to this. And even if there's like a Caladius tank over here that is able to come out and shoot, it suddenly makes it very obnoxious for me to actually attack this pocket here. And so it becomes very difficult for me to try and deny Chuck a lot of primary. But with that in mind, I'll go ahead and talk about my list, and then we'll go ahead and talk about Chuck's list. So for this event, we're playing on the list that came out before the most recent data slate. So I was still playing the Bridgehead with +1 to wound instead of +1 to hit. But it was a Bridgehead strike list. I had one Cadian command squad with all of the Special Goodens and a Power Fist on the Cadian Veteran. They were attached to, not attached, but they were joined to an Ogryn Bodyguard. I had Gaunt's Ghosts, three Militarum Tempestus command squads, one of them with a Bombast class Vox, one of them with a Shroud Projector, one of them without an enhancement. I had Ursula Creed, which we were playing as once per turn. I had Catachan Jungle Fighters, three units of Scions, two of them with Melta Plasma, one of them with Plasma Volley Gun. I had one Taurox, three units of Catachan Heavy Weapon Squad Mortars, two units of Kasrkin, both with Melta Plasma, two units of 10 Krieg Combat Engineers, two units of Krieg Heavy Weapon Squad with Flamers, and then two units of Aquilons. It's just a lot of bodies. I have a lot of tools to play the mid board. I am very good at skirmishing in general, and I can take up a ton of space on the board. And that was what this was really designed to do, is force my opponent to come out in certain ways such that I am able to take them down and take engagements on my terms. This was going up against Chuck and his Talons of the Emperor Adeptus Custodes. He had three Blade Champions. Two of them, I don't remember what all of these were. One of them is like blanks the first failed save for his unit, and I don't remember what the other one was, but I don't remember if it came up at all. He had one Anathemas Icona Rhino, two Caladius Grav Tanks with the heavy las cannon things, two units of 5 Custodian Wardens, one unit of 4 Custodian Wardens, two unit of Venatari, and then two units of 4 Witch Seekers. Overall, this should be pretty familiar to people. For anybody who's been watching like Talons of the Emperor for a little while, it's very similar to what Folger Piles played at the most recent World Championships of Warhammer, with the biggest addition being a couple extra units of Venatari Custodians instead of the Custodian Guard and Draxus that I believe Folger was playing. So as we started looking at this, I think Chuck made a bit of a mistake almost right off the bat, and he told me that he was going to be obviously putting the Venatari Custodians in reserve and deep strike. But then the other thing that I was like, I'm not sure if that's a good idea, is he decided to put the unit of 4 Custodian Wardens with a Blade Champion attached all in deep strike reserve as well. And as soon as I saw that, I went, great, this is awesome. You do not have enough tools on the board to really pressure me at all. And then the other thing is I'm going to be able to take up so much board space that your rapid ingresses are going to be, I'll be on the left side. His rapid ingresses are going to be like that, right? Like, he's really not going to have a lot of opportunity to rapid ingress anywhere that he wants to. And what I ended up telling him after the end of the game was, you probably should have just started them on the board, because anywhere that they are going to be able to rapid ingress is basically going to be in your deployment zone anyway, or somewhere that they could have gotten to with the just normal movement throughout the course of the game. In this game, it was really important for me that I never let the reserves that Chuck had be relevant in the game. I really needed them to come in from his side of the board edge, and tipping point is generally pretty good for us. And as you can see, there's just not a sight line here. So anything that is in this pocket is just not possible for your opponent to shoot into. So basically, I just took, mortars back here, completely screened this out. I took a unit of mortars, something like this over here, and then I had like my last unit of mortars here with the expectation that I was going to screen out this space a lot of the time with Gaunt's Ghost, or just using some unit of Scions. They're going to be hanging out near Ursula Creed so I could bounce them back into the air with the pickup strat at the end of my opponent's turn. So there is never really going to be opportunity to bring anything back here. After that, my general plan was understanding that this is a pretty far distance here to actually go for a charge, and as long as I have guys that are not even on the front edge of the objective, but are rather playing on like the back edge of the objective here, just like I was talking about over on the other side here, it's very difficult to attack this. The distance here is also very far. So I know it's, what is it? It's 12 plus 20, 32. So it's 28 inches between this edge and this edge. And, this is about 3/4 of that. So 28, it's about 21 inches between his deployment zone and the back of my objective, which is really, really difficult to land, even with his advance in charge on. So basically, I was able to park some guys over here. And then the rest of my game plan was I was going to use Cadian Command Squad, Catachan, Engineers, to just hang out over here, while the Taurox, the entire job of the Taurox was at some point it was going to come to here, and I was going to go ahead and launch enough OC onto this point to take it away from my opponent. And that's basically how the game went. So the first mistake that I think Chuck made was putting the Wardens in reserve instead of having them on the board to potentially run at me if he went first. The second mistake was Chuck, fairly early on, he ended up putting his Caladius, or one of his two Caladiuses, like here, and the other one was hanging out somewhere in here relatively early on. And the reason this is a mistake is because I have, like with 6-inch Deep Strike, this is leaving a lot of space in this back corner. And when I saw that Chuck had potentially undercommitted to being in the middle of the board, he put like a couple, or he just barely touched on like some Wardens like on this side, and he had his Caladius over here. He was only going to be scoring a maximum of 10 on turn 2, and that gave me an opportunity to drop 6-inch drop Scions over here, and the Taurox, which had already moved up to here when I went first, is now in a position where I can advance. Like, I only need to put 3 or 4 OC on this point, and there was an opportunity here, I think, for Chuck to use his reactive move on these guys to go here, but because I'd already put enough pressure in the middle of the board and he had another unit of Custodian Wardens that were, somewhere in here, he decided to reactive move this first, which meant that he was not able to put enough guys on this point. So I ended up taking this one from him going into his turn 2, and my 6-inch Deep Strike Scions were able to kill this with the help of some engineers that ran out this way, did a little bit of mortal wounds to the Caladius, and just created a lot of pressure. So I ended up holding him to a 0 on his turn 2 primary. So this created a massive problem, right? Because I have Scions already just hanging out in this corner of the battlefield. He needs to do something, right? He can't just let these guys come over and hang on to his home objective, because then he's playing for only 2 objectives, where I get to play for 3. And so this ended up meaning that the extra unit of Custodian Wardens ended up like dropping in here later on. I believe it was on turn 3 that they ended up dropping in here and eventually dealing with this, but it also meant that his Venatari, he had 1 unit like drop here-ish and like 1 unit like drop here. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, this is great. This is exactly what I want. He never has opportunity to come attack this. We'll brawl for this for a little while, and he will eventually hold this, and he will eventually hold this. But for the most part, I'm going to be holding my natural. I'm going to be the one threatening to hold the middle. He's not going to be threatening to hold the middle because I'll have too much OC in the middle of the board. And as soon as I saw this open up, I thought, yeah, I have already won the game. Now the question is going to be, how much can I push the differential in order to help out the rest of my team? So the one other really interesting thing that ended up happening this game is I had my unit of Cadian Command Squad and Ogryn Bodyguard hanging out somewhere in here. And one of the units of Wardens that was hanging out around here ended up going for a charge and left like 2 guys here, but the Blade Champion was here and the rest of them were kind of like hanging out in this piece of terrain. And at this time, I had a unit of Engineers spread out something like this. I had a unit of Kasrkin that were hanging out somewhere in here. And the Taurox was still just chilling on a couple of wounds over here. And so what I was really looking to do as I was going into my turn 3 was I needed to isolate this unit of Wardens on the middle objective, because I really wanted my wound rerolls against them, because the Wardens have the -1 to wound ability baked in while they're being led by the Blade Champion. And so as he had his unit of Wardens about here, the first thing I did was the unit of Engineers. They advanced over and they created a wall something like this. Next, I took the Kasrkin that were... Oh, they were engaged. I had them fall back, and they end up creating a wall something like this. And effectively, what I was able to do with this is I was able to freeze this unit of Wardens such that they were not going to be able to move at all off of this point. They were going to be stuck on the point. I was going to get my wound rerolls into this unit. At the same time, there's like another unit of Wardens like over here. They must have been more visible. I think they were like here. I dropped a unit of Aquilons in here such that, they could help shoot here, but just as importantly, they were a wall such that when these Wardens came out, they weren't really going to go anywhere. And then I dropped a unit of Scions over here and a unit of Scions over here with the idea that all of this was going to be contributing fire into this Wardens unit. I was going to put a bunch of mortal wounds into them and everything else. However, I do think that Chuck over-respected the ability for my army to do damage, because he ended up popping at this time the 4 plus here, the 4 plus here, and also the other unit of Wardens that was over here that I think I dropped like a unit of Aquilons here to just block him out. He ended up popping this 4 up Feel No Pain as well, and so suddenly once they were all gone, I was able to just kind of do what I wanted later on. He really needs that one turn of I can't do damage to him to really deal with everything. And I don't think he needed to block out this one. I don't think he needed to use this one. But anyway, as we actually go into the shooting phase, I start getting a little bit worried because as this one shoots and this one shoots and these guys shoot at it, he's making a lot of 4-up invul saves and a lot of 4-up feel no pains. And I remember at one point, like, I borrowed his dice to make some save rolls, and I rolled absolutely insane. And then when I was like, here's a gazillion AP2 damage one-shots that are ignoring cover, he ended up rolling all of those, and he was also just saving like an absolute god using my dice. That was really funny. But at the end of it, I'm able to pick up almost this entire unit. I actually kill all of the wardens, so it's just the blade champion here. And I've already taken control back of the middle. And now that this unit doesn't have a 4-up Feel No Pain, and this unit doesn't have a 4-up Feel No Pain that it can pop, he's never really able to create enough pressure on the rest of the board in order to take me down. And that's basically how the game ended up going. I was able to create enough space here where I was able to isolate this unit. I don't think he'd ever seen a player who just prevented the reactive move before and just make sure that it's not possible. But in general, if you see reactive moves, most of them have the phrase, as long as you're not in engagement range, you can make a reactive move. So I just made sure to fall back the unit last such that I was able to make sure that they couldn't go anywhere. And that's something that you can generally look to do in a lot of your games. If you can prevent a reactive move by just like wrapping the unit, especially if it's only dangerous in melee, that's something you can do. And then the other thing that you can look to do is if you're going to be triggering reactive moves, you want to trigger the reactive move first. That's one of the first things you want to force your opponent to do it, so that you get to see what it is that they're going to be doing with that reactive move. Because if they are not, as soon as they decide they're not going to reactive move off of your first or second trigger, you don't need to trigger it again. You usually only need to trigger these reactive moves once, and then you can get to see what they actually do. Overall, the game was fairly controlled from there. I was able to hold Chuck to only 25 primary. He held 2 on turn 3, 1 on turn 4, and then, because he was just out of units at the end of the game, he was only able to hold 2 on turn 5 as well. So I held him to 25 primary, and I scored 45 for myself, holding my home and the one up here every turn of the game, and holding this one at least once. So overall, that ended up being a 15-5 win for me. And showing you guys what the rest of it looked like, I'm up here. I was predicted to score a 12 here, and you can see that over the course of the game, it started being a 10, but then it just slowly built, and I had that about 25-point lead for most of the rest of the game. The rest of my team also did pretty well. Michael got the 14, so he was on track. Tomas was a little bit below, but in general, whenever I look at teams, if you are plus or minus 2 from the number you tell me is likely, I consider that to be on track. Like, you are on Matrix, because it's a dice game. You don't have that much control over it. Ben ended up getting his 12, and Alejandro blew out his opponent into, looks like it must have been Aeldari, where he just had a really good game, and he ended up being 8 above Matrix, so that was really good. We ended up winning this one. We were projected to score 58. As a team, we ended up scoring 67, so we ended up getting our first win there over Barely Battle Ready. Round 2, we were paired up against Team Zero Comp Scholars. And I got paired up against Aaron Funderburg and his Hypercrypt Necrons. I actually hadn't played up against Hypercrypt since the nerf to them, and I kind of had assumed that they were a little bit dead. It was not a list that I was really expecting to see at all, or an archetype that I was expecting to see. But it was definitely a cool list, and so we'll go ahead and go over it. It was the Hexmark Destroyer with, I think this is the one that lets you pick up an extra thing. Second Hexmark Destroyer, the Silent King, 1 unit of 5 Immortals, 1 unit of Canoptic Spiders, 2 Doom Scythes, which are the planes, 1 Doomsday Arc, 1 unit of 5 Flayed Ones, 2 individual Locust Destroyers, 1 Monolith, and 1 unit of Ophidian Destroyer. So the biggest thing about this, the way that this plays, is you have these 2 Doomsize, and because they're aircraft, you can bring them in only on turn 2, but the fact that they are still Necrons, you can pick them up, and so they don't actually have to ever make their move. You can just put them in one spot, and as long as you are moving them around with the Silent King, they don't have to move at all. They just sit in one position the entire time, and or they can move to another part of the board because you can pick up 3 things. You can pick up both Doomsize and the Silent King, and they just kind of hang out in one spot. And they don't do a ton of damage, but they do enough damage that your opponent does have to deal with this at some point. Now, I was a little bit worried going into this one because even though I think normally this is supposed to be a pretty decent matchup for me, the issue was that we were playing this one on Purge the Foe, Mission B, which is Purge the Foe, Smoke and Mirrors, and Tipping Point, which means that you can put things back in reserve. And my army has a lot of units, and Aaron's army does not have nearly as many units, and several of them are very difficult to kill. It's very annoying for my army to try and have to kill the Silent King or try and have to kill a Monolith. I really didn't want to have to deal with them. The other thing is my army tends to rely on putting enough pressure on the board that my opponent has to come out and skirmish with me, but Aaron just had the tools. He had the indirect from the Silent King. He had the pseudo indirect from the Flyers that he can just create a lot of pressure on the board in ways that it's hard to really interact with. One of the other issues about this matchup is my Mortars at Strength 5 don't really have great targets in his army because even things like the Flayed Ones and the Immortals, which are his, little units, are really tough for me to deal with because I'm wounding them on 4s a lot of the time, and then they're saving on 3s or 4s. And so it's really hard for me to actually do enough damage to any of his little pieces with my indirect that they're mostly just there to screen out the entire backfield because he's Hypercrypt. I need to make sure he cannot get into my backfield whatsoever. Luckily for me, I ended up going second on Purge the Foe, which helped out a lot. I think this could have been a lot worse for me if I had ended up going first for a couple of reasons. One, Hypercrypt loves going second. Hypercrypt is really, really good at just using the go second, so they have an extra turn of actually using the hyperphasing rules. The other thing that's really good about Purge the Foe going second is I get to see how many things my opponent actually destroys, so I have a good idea of how many things I need to destroy on my turn in order to actually make sure I can keep it even, or even try and kill more things. But basically, the main way that Aaron was able to kind of showcase how his army played is he was able to use the fact that his Doomsize can come in off of a board edge. They just have to be strategic reserves. And he basically just brought both planes in here. He put the Silent King and the Miniers around here, and the little spider that gives them the 6 up Feel No Pain somewhere in here. And the idea was that he's going to be within 6 inches with both planes of the Silent King, so they're both going to be rerolling 1s to hit and wound. They're both going to be within 6 inches of the little spider, so they're both going to have a 6 up Feel No Pain. And then they can basically shoot, like, there's a little pocket, like, in here that he can't shoot, and there's, like, a little pocket here, and, like, a pocket here that he was not able to see, and maybe a pocket here as well. And that was about it. Those were about the only places I could put models that my opponent was not going to be able to see throughout the course of his shooting phase. And if he really wanted to, he probably could see into here. He usually can't see here, but he probably was going to be able to get an angle here if he really wanted it at some point. And when he did this, I don't remember exactly what they did to come in and actually kill, but my thought process was if I can trade a unit of Scions for one of these planes, then I don't necessarily have to deal with the rest of his army very much because I can screen out most of the rest of the army. The Silent King has a really big footprint. The Monolith has a huge footprint. The Doomsday Arc, I mean, it can come somewhere, but it's definitely going to be something where if I can put a unit of Kasrkin and throw some grenades and chuck a Melt Mine into it, I have ways to kill it without actually committing the Scions. The other thing was over time I was able to use like my Kasrkin and my Aquilons to deal with the rest of his small units such that they weren't able to really do anything. But I dropped one unit of Scions here right away, and I was able to kill one of the Doomsize. Of course, this unit of Scions almost immediately gets killed back on my opponent's turn. But the one really big thing that they do end up doing is the little spider that was here, when it comes out, I have my Scions overwatch it and actually kill it. Which I think the biggest thing that did is it ended up allowing me to tie the number of destroyed units on one of the turns way more easily than I potentially should have. But it did mean that my Scions just got to trade for an extra unit. After that, I think I had an opportunity to still play this one for an 11 or 12, but I ended up making a pretty big mistake. So the mistake that I ended up making was there was like a Hexmark Destroyer here, like two Immortals right around here, and I think it was the Ophidian Destroyers or whatever, like the tall, snaky looking things. It's not Canoptic Wraiths. But I ended up dropping a unit of Aquilons right in here. I dropped Gaunt's Ghosts such that they were able to see the Immortals here. And the big mistake that I ended up making in this spot, because the plane ended up coming in over here, and I was able to use like a unit of Scions pretty safely here to end up killing it. So I was able to take that one out. I ended up taking both planes out by turn 3. But the mistake I made was I had forgotten that Gaunt's Ghosts were set up with the intent of actually going for these Immortals here. And it meant that when I started activating my units, I used these Aquilons to shoot here first. And that meant that I had nothing left to actually shoot at the destroyer that was just hanging out here. I don't remember what tools I used to kill this, but I was able to kill this as well. But the big point was I ended up killing one too few things because I just forgot that I had allocated resources to deal with this. I had allocated resources to deal with this. And so this guy up here ended up still being alive, and I ended up missing out, and this was on turn... Was this turn 4? It must have been going into turn 4. I don't remember exactly. Or maybe it was turn 3. But the biggest point was that I ended up missing out on one opportunity where I needed to get one more unit kill, and it meant that Aaron was able to score an extra 4 points of primary up over me. And also, he just had those assets ready to go and do things, which were able to score a little bit more points. The game ended up becoming really, really close at the end, and I had just run out of assets on the board. I could only pick up so many things. I didn't really have enough CP. And what the game came down to was I had an opportunity because I was going to get hold more objectives relatively easily. That was not ever really in question. But the question that I had was there was a Doomsday Arc that was hanging out right here, and I had drawn Mark for Death and Behind Enemy Lines. And at this point, Aaron only had like 4 things. It was a Monolith that was on his home objective, the Silent King that was hanging out like right here, the Doomsday Arc, and maybe it was this Destroyer, actually. I don't remember exactly what the last thing was. But of course he marks this one, and this one. And my thought process is if I drop in order to go kill this, I can't do it behind enemy lines because it gives too much risk of the monolith overwatching me over here. So that's kind of a moot point. I can't go for the Silent. I just don't have the resources to kill Silent King. I don't have the resources to kill the monolith, but I might have the resources to kill a Doomsday Arc that was only on 6 wounds. So what I ended up doing is I ended up dropping Gaunt's Ghosts, 9 inches away over here. So they were hanging out over here. And my thought process was by dropping in over here, I can get my 3 on behind enemy lines for sure. And if I kill this, it's worth 5 points for Mark for Death and an additional 4 points for killing one thing. So this is a 9-point kill if I can actually make it happen. And unfortunately, I roll for it all, and it doesn't happen. Looking at it now, looking at the rest of the points, I don't think this kill actually makes a difference at all. Because I ended up losing the game 80 points to 85. And if I'd gotten 9 more points, I would have been 89 to 85, which is still ultimately a 10-10 draw. So, yeah, I don't know. I ended up talking to Aaron after this game, and I basically said, I think that this like matchup mechanically is just really not fun on Purge the Foe in particular, because there's no real back and or I mean the back and forth is, can I kill his planes? And the answer is yes, I can definitely kill his planes. I can get to his planes if I really, really want to. But he doesn't have to come out and play the board at all if he doesn't want to. And he didn't. He basically chose not to. He did basically the minimum required to make sure that I was never going to hold more until the bottom of 5, which is, you know, a very reasonable way to play. But it did mean that the game was kind of destined for a draw no matter what. But we still had to play out the entire rest of the game just in case somebody got lucky, something went really well one way or another. And yeah, overall though, the team ended up doing pretty well. I was projected to get a 12. I ended up getting a 10. And like I said, plus or minus 2 from the initial projection is on track. Michael's Tyranids got a 16. Tomas's Knights got a 12, which is 2 above Matrix, but, you know, on Matrix. Hawk got a 10, or Ben got a 10, and then Alejandro got a 13 when he was projected for a 12. And when we're overall projected to get a 56, getting a couple of our players high enough above Matrix ended up winning us a 61-point win across the entire game. And so we end our second round with 2 wins and 0 losses. For our third round, I ended up playing up against Mike and his Retaliation Cadre Tau. And I had actually played up against Mike at last year's CTC, where I was playing a Storm Sword and he was playing 2 Tiger Sharks. And one of the things that happened that was kind of funny to me is as we were setting up for this game, Ben, my Tau player, comes over to me and just goes, Josh, you are going to annihilate this matchup. You've never lost Retaliation Cadre before, and this guy has a list that is worse than mine. And, you know, I took a quick look at it and was basically like, yeah, this looks like a list that is probably pretty doable for me. I should probably get a small win out of this one, but both of us missed a couple of key things about the list that actually made the matchup a lot worse for me than I had initially expected. So let's go ahead and go through the list. He had Commander Farsight, 1 Cold Star Commander with Burst Cannons, 2 Enforcer Commanders with Fusion Blasters. One of them had the Star Flare, so the up-down. And one of the big things here that we missed is that both of these had gun drones instead of shield drones, which gives them an extra, I think it gives them an extra, like, 6 shots or something. 4 to 8 shots per commander. He had 1 unit of Fire Knives with missiles, 1 unit of Star Size with burst cannons, 2 units of Sun Forges, 1 unit of Kroot, 1 unit of Pathfinders, 3 individual Piranhas, 3 Riptides, and then 3 units of Stealth Suits. And so, like I mentioned, the first thing that we missed out on was the fact that there's a lot of gun drones coming in on the Cold Star, or on the Enforcer Commanders, which gives them a lot of extra shots. And it meant that each one of these Sunforge units is actually putting out like 20 shots. And even though a lot of them are Melta shots, which only kill 1 guy, that's still going to be 20 shots, right? That's still going to be like 8 dead guys from Meltas, and then a couple more dead guys coming out from all the gun drones. And when Scion units are 15 models, being able to kill like 8 to 12 of them really significantly hurts their ability to actually play. The other part of them being Enforcer Commanders is they have permanent Armor of Contempt. They just worsen your AP by 1. I think it's shooting only, but as a guard player, like, I only really play the shooting phase. So that's a functionally permanent AOC. And up against all of my AP1 Hotshot Lasguns, that means that they're still saving on 3s in the open, which is a pretty big damage reduction. It's actually like a 50% damage reduction up against all of my Las weapons. The one other thing that we didn't recognize right away was these Riptides are actually pretty annoying for Bridgehead. The fact that they're toughness 9 means that they are relatively easy to wound with our meltas, but the issue that we have against them is that they have a 4-up invul, which means that we don't have we don't know how much damage we're going to do to them. Simply because they have this 4-up invul does mean that sometimes we're going to overkill the crap out of them because he's going to roll low on his saves, but sometimes he's going to take no damage on them whatsoever. I am playing this one on Mission C, which is Linchpin, Tipping Point, and Fog of War, so no core strats on the first turn. And I also played it on Layout 2, which I definitely played Linchpin. It was definitely Layout 2. I don't remember if it was Mission C that I played up against Zach's Retaliation Cadre Tau at SoCal Open. But I was also playing a very different list at that point. This was like right when Aquilons were new. And the game actually like played out fairly similarly to how that previous game played that I played up against Zach. Basically, the game was like nobody was ever really able to hold these because they're just out in the open. Nobody's able to find a place where they're able to really be safe, where they can actually take control of any of these objectives. The fact that there is this pocket right in here means that, whoever is on this side of the board just puts enough OC here that they nullify anything coming in from the other direction. And of course, the same thing is true here. You can just put enough OC on this side such that the player who puts guys here is either getting shot from like this angle or maybe this angle, or there's just enough OC to pawn on the point. And of course, the middle, if one of you is not playing a melee army where you can use like this spot to stage, like you can't stand on this objective anywhere, right? There's maybe a small spot like right here where you can be kind of cheeky and cut this angle pretty harshly, but somebody who is playing reasonably and puts like something here to make sure that that's not possible, there's nowhere you can stand in the middle objective, right? It is not safe to stand on any of the center objectives, and so this one ends up oftentimes becoming 3-3-3-3-3-3-3, and then whoever goes last scores like a 15. And that is pretty close to what happened in this game. Probably the best move that I made was Mike at one point had his burst cannon suits here, and I was able to sneak in a unit of Scions with a 6-inch deep strike here in order to kill them like right away. And this was my main priority. I know from experience in this matchup that if I can trade a unit of Scions for the burst cannon unit, I'm generally going to be in a pretty good position because that's the one that can easily pick up 1 or even 2 units of Scions in one turn because it's just the volume of damage and the volume of shots that they have. I think Ben says that this unit has close to 60 shots. But the major problem that I was kind of running into is I was just doing less damage than I expected to. He had like a unit of suits, I think there were Sunforges over here at one point, and I was able to take like a unit of Scions like here to like shoot at them. But they didn't all die. Like I'm used to seeing these units of Crisis suits just evaporate to Scion units. But having having access to the permanent AOC from the Enforcer Commanders was actually keeping them alive fairly often. And you only need a couple of commanders still left alive in order to do real damage right on back to all the Scion units, to just tie them up if you can get them into melee. To put Riptides into melee with these units suddenly becomes a very big problem for the Bridgehead player. And these were things that we had not identified until it was too late into the Matrix. And so what ends up going back is, at some point, Mike, on turn 4, is able to score this one, simply because he has more units still left because I'm not doing as much damage as I'm expecting to, and he's doing more damage to me than I'm expecting him to. And he's able to score this one on turn 4, so he gets an 8. And then, naturally, of course, he's able to score, I think it's these, or maybe all of them. So he scores a 15 in the bottom. And that ends up being... the fact that he ends up scoring the 15 at the end of the game is basically the entire difference that we had in this game, because I ended up scoring 62 points to 72 points. Now, to look at the rest of our matrix, this one, we had a bit of an oopsie. So I scored a little bit below matrix. I ended up scoring a 9 when I was expecting to score a 12. Our Terrence player only scored a 10 when we were expecting him to score a 14. And then here's the really big issue. We were expecting an 11 originally from our Knights player playing up against Legion of Excess, but he got blasted. Call it luck, call it whatever. It ended up going very wrong very quickly, and they got a minus, looks like a minus 10 on that one, which was really tough for us. You can't really come back from that because you can see that that is almost the entire difference between our projected scores and what we actually got. We end up being minus 11 overall, and 10 of that comes off of one game. So unfortunately, one of our players just had a bad game, and I think I can attribute this one a lot to myself, actually, because I had not expected the WTC terrain that he ended up playing on to be as bad for him as it ended up being. So I think this is probably the biggest mistake that I made, was putting this player on a bad bit of terrain, on a bad matchup, and I also think that the matchup was worse for us than we had potentially initially expected. But before we go too far, I do want to say a couple of things. So this was the team that ended up winning the event, Team Zero Cobb Gentlemen, and we ended up being at 46 points. If we had gotten one more point across any of our players, it would have been a draw, right? Because you need to have 54 points to win. They got to their 54. So I'm pretty happy with my team in that regard. However, I have to say that Team Zero Comp is unfortunately the one team that I hope I don't have to play again in the future. Almost every single time I see certain members of their team come out to events, people start talking because there are people on the team that are known issues in the community. One of the issues that I had personally playing up against Mike, and I expressed this to him afterwards, and he said I was pretty tired, and it's like, yeah, that's fine, I understand, is he wasn't narrating anything that he was doing, which it made it very difficult to follow what was going on. I'm a very vocal player, I'm a very communicative player when I play, to be like, okay, here's the 10 plasma shots, 8 of them hit, 2 of them sustained, I'm back to 10, they're wounding on 4s, you're touching objectives, so I'm re-rolling. Okay, now you owe me 7 AP3 saves. And then he would start rolling, and he didn't say anything, right? And it was very difficult for me to follow, like, what was going on. Like, how many crisis suits did I just kill? What are you saving on, and why, right? Like, I know you have a 3-up base, but are you saving on 5s here? Are you saving on 4s here? Do these have an invul? Just let me... It's impossible for me to identify when my opponent is, doing things out of line. I don't think he was cheating, to be clear. I have no reason to think he was cheating, but it made it very difficult for me to, like, mentally police what was going on and for me to have a good understanding. So sometimes there'd be, like, a crisis suit on 1 wound, and I don't know that because I don't know how many saves were being made. I don't know how many feel no pains are being made, and that made it very difficult for me as another player because it's a very social game. But in particular, I was watching a little bit of James Carmona's game, and I know there were at least 2 rules errors that I saw actually come up in the game. The first one was quoting wrong AP on Abaddon's weapons. And then it was only called out, of course, because my player took a look at the app and was like, wait a second, this is the wrong AP. I should be saving on one better than what we were actually looking at. And then the other one that I saw happen was using firing deck during Overwatch, which you're not allowed to do because it's locked to the shooting phase. And unfortunately, as a bystander, we're not allowed to, like, interject into the game. We're not allowed, in general, to make any tactical advice or say anything about the state of the game as someone who is not part of the game. And so naturally, I didn't really feel like I could say anything in the moment to my teammate. But I know that if this was an isolated incident, whatever happens. But this is not the first event. Every single event I have seen this guy at, I have heard another issue coming out of this player. And while I have a generally positive relationship with the rest of Zero Comp, I think it is very telling that they are choosing to keep him on their team after multiple years of known issues with this player. So while I know that most of you guys who are watching this are probably not in the SoCal area, probably not on the west coast of the United States, for those of you who are, and if you guys have also had issues specifically at this CTC, I would really ask that you take the time to go ahead and submit that in the survey form, and hopefully we can prevent these issues from occurring in the future. So in round 4, I ended up playing up against Wyatt Turek from XPZ Orion. And I was a little cautious going into this one because I had a little bit of an issue with the game that I played with Wyatt at Cali Cup. And so I was a little bit worried that we were going to have potentially another issue. But I have to say that while I was a little bit hesitant going into it, the game that I had with Wyatt, absolutely no problems. Everything went well. We were confirming the score the entire time. We were making sure that everything was working out well. The clock just worked out perfectly. There were absolutely no issues with this game. So I really enjoyed that the second time I played someone, it had absolutely no issues, and hopefully he had a good time as well. But Wyatt was playing Guard Hammer of the Emperor. In this list, he was running two Rogaldorn tank commanders, one with the Calm Under Fire, so being able to give an extra order, and one of them had Veteran Crew, so it was always rerolling ones. I had one unit of Cadians, two Tauroxes, three Hellhounds, and they all had Kim Cannon Multi-Melta, and I did not like this choice at all. I don't think it really makes sense unless you're really, really trying to target certain matchups with it. Um, three units of Krieg Combat Engineers, one unit of Krieg Heavy Weapons with Heavy Flamers, one Lemanus Battle Tank with Multi Meltas and a Las Cannon, one normal Rogaldorn with Triple Stubber, Multi Melta, and then three individual Scout Sentinels with Las Cannons and Hunter Killers. Overall, a fairly normal looking Hammer of the Emperor list. We end up playing this one on Mission P, which is Scorched Earth, Inspired Leadership, and Crucible of Battle. And we also played this one on Layout 2. So this is my second time playing on Layout 2, which is totally fine for me. I actually think this is one of my better terrain layouts than I had initially expected it to be. But the big advantage that I knew going into this one was my army has way more OC than my opponent's does. My opponent had one unit of battle line in the Cadians, and then engineers are one, Hellhounds are three, Scout Sentinels are two, Tauroxes are two, and the Rogaldorns are all five. And he can, of course, boost some of these up by one if he wants to use the Duty and Honor order at some point. However, basically every single one of my units is going to have more OC. Right, a unit of Catachan is 20 OC. A unit of engineers is 10 OC. Kasrkin can be 10, they can be 20. They're very easy to just put out onto an objective, and I only need, two Hellhounds is 6 OC. I only need 3 Catachan to be surviving on an objective for me to actually take that away from my opponent. And playing on Scorched Earth meant that I was pretty confident I would be able to make sure that I was going to be scoring way more primary than my opponent, especially since I ended up going second. And why I think generally played a pretty reasonable game of Hammer of the Emperor into Bridgehead. One of the issues that Hammer of the Emperor playing into Bridgehead has is that it doesn't skirmish nearly as well. You generally need more Tauroxes. You need like 3 or 4 Tauroxes full of like Kasrkin or heavy skirmishing pieces to actually tangle with a lot of the Bridgehead, just infantry that they're able to put out. And the other thing is Hammer of the Emperor, yes, it's fast, but only one of your units can actually advance and shoot. And so there are a couple gameplay spots where I think Wyatt, who I'm used to seeing playing other armies, I'm more used to seeing him play different variants of Marines than I am used to seeing him play Guard. I think there were a couple spots where he made some. I think there were a couple spots where he made some issues where I was able to take big advantage. One of them was fairly early on. He took one of his Rogaldorn commanders over here, the reroll ones, the Veteran Crew, and put it over here in order to make sure that it was able to shoot at whatever I had put onto this point. But a couple of things happened in this moment. Um, I had I had put a unit of like engineers or something, and there's like the dregs of a unit like right here, where he decided to charge a scout sentinel directly into this unit. And that allowed me, who had my Cadian command squad with the Ogryn Bodyguard hanging out here, to heroic myself onto the point. So this was able to put 12 OC on the point because they were able to beat the Scout Sentinel, who was already mostly dead, and take it down. And at the time, Wyatt only had 11 OC on the point, which, as we all know, is less than 12. So I was able to score an extra bit of primary there. But the other thing is this Rogaldorn commander being out here, I was able to go ahead and take one of my units of Scions, drop it over here, and I was just able to kill this Rogaldorn commander even through the smoke keyword because I was able to shoot at it with something that was able to strip cover immediately. Because I was able to take away the cover, he was saving Meltas on 6s, and then I just have enough plasma that at AP3 is going to take down a Rogaldorn without a blank fairly consistently. And even though he was going to be able to bring out some unit of Flamers over here and trade against most of the unit of Scions, the unit of Scions actually ended up remaining active the entire game, even if at like only partial strength. But giving this heroic intervention ended up giving an extra 5 points of primary for me on turn 2 when I'm not supposed to be getting that. Other than that, I think the only major mistake that Wyatt made in this game was as we're getting towards the end of the game, Wyatt ends up bringing out, I think he's got like a Leman Russ battle tank here, like a Rogaldorn commander on this objective. And the Cadians are still ringed out somewhere over here. And he has like one engineer here. And the mistake that he made was I still had, because I am Bridgehead and I can put things in reserve, and because they go into reserve after the game starts, I can bring them in anytime I want after that. And that means that there was a gap in here where I was able to put a unit of Scions where they weren't going to be visible to this tank, and also going to be within 9 inches here. And with no OC on the point, it's just a sticky objective here. I was able to go ahead and set this up with a rapid ingress, such that I was guaranteed to burn his home objective in the bottom of 5. And ultimately, those are really the only two spots where I think Wyatt made any errors that made the game be slightly worse in the Matrix. I think I was basically always likely to get a 12 in this. Maybe if I went first, it was going to be a 10, simply because we're just going to trade OC back and forth and back and forth. But because I was able to get the burn for an extra 5 points instead of, I was able to burn this one instead of burning this one, that's 5 points there. And then the heroic intervention here also gets me another 5 points. So I end up getting a total of an extra 10 points of primary throughout the course of this game. End up being the real difference maker over the course of this one. I think the one other thing that Wyatt potentially could have looked to have done earlier is he had a Taurox hanging out in here for a long time. And I was a little bit surprised that he never used this Taurox to just burst through the wall over here, disembark the engineers, and trade away my Kasrkin. Because these Kasrkin ended up being pretty annoying for basically the entire game. And they were able to constantly just create pressure on my opponent's natural objective here, because they were just able to hang out and put OC on this point. So he always had to do something in order to try and make sure he was scoring those points. But overall, good game. I was running a little bit lower on time than he was, simply because I had a lot more guys. I have a lot more things that I have to shoot. Having 3 Rogaldorns is very nice for the clock, and so I'm kind of looking forward to switching over to that at some point. But as a team, we ended up doing pretty well in this one. I was predicted to get a 12, ended up scoring a 14, which is, the top end of the Matrix. My Tyranids player ended up getting a 13. My Knights player ended up getting a 16 instead of a 12. My Tau player got a 14 instead of a 10. And then I'm not sure I believe this. I think this was supposed to be a 10. But either way, my World Leaders player also got a 10 as well. So instead of getting a 54, I think all of my players were at or above Matrix. So we end up scoring a 67. And we end up ending this one going 3 wins and 1 loss to the team that would end up getting first in the event. So now I finally get to tell you about my favorite game that I played at the event, which I was playing up against Phil from Making Saves Black, and he was playing Devoted of Aeneid. Phil was playing 2 Autarchs, the Incarn, 1 Wave Serpent, 2 units of Fire Dragons, 2 units of Howling Banshees, 1 Shadow Weaver platform, 1 unit of Striking Scorpions, 2 individual Warlock Skyrunners, 3 units of Warp Spiders, 1 unit of 6 Wind Riders, and then 3 Wraith Lords. Now, this was my first time ever playing against Inari. And the thing about Inari that you need to know is if you kill a unit entirely in the shooting phase, the Inari player then gets to pick 1 unit in their army, any unit in their army, range does not matter, and it gets to make a normal move. This normal move can also use one of the battle tokens. And so you could move something that was not on an objective to be on an objective. You can use this to cancel actions. It can also be done to score primary for yourself. The other thing that you can do is you can do it on a transport and use the star engines on it. So it can move, I think they move 14 base, the Wave Serpents. So you can move an additional d6 plus 1. So at the end of your opponent's shooting phase, you could potentially move anything in your army anywhere. The other thing that it has is the Incarn. So once during your opponent's turn, if something dies, the Incarn can teleport to wherever that thing was as soon as it dies. And that is a really, really tough thing to deal with because the Incarn can generally wait until the last activation. If the last activation kills something, the Incarn can be kind of anywhere it wants. And so there's a lot of tricks that this army has in order to try and move around the board. So Phil and I ended up playing this one on Mission N, which is the Ritual, Swift Action, so Battle Line can advance or fall back in action, and Crucible of Battle. And of course, since it is the Ritual, this objective doesn't exist, and this objective doesn't exist. Now, I need to tell you a little bit about my general strategy going into this one. Because it is the Ritual, whoever goes second is going to get their 15 at the end almost every single time. The other thing that you generally see in these games is that you're going to score a 5, a 10, a 15, and a 15 for a typical 45 points of primary going first or second. It's very hard to upset that, but if one of your players is able to change that, it is usually a big 5-point swing that your opponent is unlikely to ever get back. The problem that I had in this is that if I ever kill anything, Phil just had his Wave Serpent chilling, like, here-ish. And I knew if I ever full killed a unit, this Wave Serpent is coming on in. My goal was that I was going to build an objective, like, here, here, and, like, here. Something like that. And then, depending on how it went, maybe I could also build a second one here. Unfortunately, I didn't quite do the measurements properly. I think there's a way in order to get, this one moves over a couple of inches, this one moves over a couple of inches, and then you can put your last one, like, here. And yes, it's allowed to overhang the actual objective button cannot overhang the board, but the rest of, like, the objective range is allowed to. So I think there's a way where I could have done it a little bit better, but I hadn't measured on this one as accurately as I was supposed to. Anyway, that was my general game plan. The other major part of my game plan was that I was going to use my mortars to try and not kill his units. I was going to try and get a couple of them here, get a couple of them there, but never full kill a unit. To try and kill 3 warp spiders, to try and kill 4 howling banshees, but never try and kill an entire unit. And this would leave an interesting spot, because if I can kill enough of the warp spiders such that there's not enough of them to jump in, shoot my guys, and then auto-see me on a point, it's going to make it very hard for him to interrupt my ability to score primary. And without those, like, the Wraith Lords, or whatever, like, the Wraith Lords, yeah, the Wraith Lords, like, they're enough OC, they're enough damage to kind of be threatening, but I can deal with that. I can make sure that I can deal with all of those tools by just killing them and making sure I commit. The other thing that I was going to try and do in this game was you need to make sure that the things that you are killing, you have I had an X-Trine of Scions ready to go to try and shoot them, such that the Incarn was never able to teleport into my side of the board. And for the most part, like, I feel like I tried to do that fairly well. A couple funny things happened this game. So the first thing that was kind of entertaining is I put a unit of Catachan out here at the beginning of the game because I drew Established Locus. And Phil put a Wraith Lord right here, and he killed 7 of them. So I'm down to only 3 guys on this objective. He goes for a charge, misses it. The other thing that happens in this spot is I had put out one of my units of Flamers, something like this with their little dude hanging out with them, and my opponent had drawn Established Locus as well, and so he put out 1 Warp Spider because I killed 4 of the Warp Spiders with Mortars the first time around, and he put, like, 1 of them right here, such that was within 18 inches of 2 of them. And then he killed this unit, and 1 of them shot on death. This Warp Spider was going for Established Locus. So the one flamer that shot on death, I ended up going and rolling a 1 for its number of shots. And so I CP'd the number of shots, and I turned it from a 1 into a 5, and I was able to kill this Warp Spider. So I spent a CP, denied the 2 points, and tried to stick my opponent with Established Locust so that it was just stuck there. Now, luckily, a couple of things. Remember, it's not my shooting phase, so he doesn't get to do the free move with something in his army. And 2, it's my opponent's turn, so he's not able to teleport the Incarn to it. But because I still have 3 Catachan here in the middle, I end up scoring a 10 on my turn 2 primary. And I deny my opponent Established Locust on turn 1. I don't think I've ever done that before. However, my next turn is where things start to go really, really wonky. So remember how I was saying I was trying to leave a couple of Aspect Warriors in every unit alive such that I could hopefully kill all of them at once. You know, there's like one guy here, one guy here, one guy there. Mortar, mortar, mortar. I can kill the Exarch in every unit at the very end of it. Unfortunately, on my first turn, I had left, I think it was 3? I think this was 4 wounds of spiders because the Exarch was still there. And what I ended up doing was, I don't remember exactly how I lost the 1 mortar, but I had lost... Oh, he had his own, like, little piece of indirect that was, like, hiding here, and it killed, like, 1 mortar here. But I still had 2 mortars here, and I had taken 1 unit of mortars, and I think I killed, like, 2 warp spiders, like, here. And so I thought, okay, surely this unit of mortars doesn't kill that. I had set up my turn. You know, I have my objective here. I have my second objective here. Everything's fine. I have like a gazillion guys over here. I have the Cadian command squad here. I shoot 2 mortars at this unit of warp spiders. They roll 11 shots. I'm thinking this is totally fine. You know, 4s, reroll 1s. I'm going to hit 6, maybe 7 of them. Great. Then the 6 or 7 should turn into, you know, 4-ish wounds that he's probably going to have to save. That's not what happened. I rolled 11 shots. 10 of them hit. 8 of them wounded. And the thing that does not come up a lot, that you generally don't do, is if you have both an invulnerable save and a normal save, you can choose which one to take. Almost always, you choose to take the better save because you don't want to die. However, Phil did want this unit dead because it was the last thing that I was going to be able to shoot, and he was going to be able to make a normal move. Remember how I said that there was a Wave Serpent that was just hanging here? Yeah. Phil chose to take these 8 saves on his 5-up invul on the Warp Spiders instead of the 3-up normal save that they had. Because if he takes him on the 3-up normal save, you know, these 8 wounds, he's going to save, like, 5 of them, and he'll have, like, you know, he'll take 3, and he'll have, like, 1 wound left. But if he tries to save them on the 5-up saves, he's going to save, like, 3 of them, and that means that 5 will go through, and 5, of course, is more than 4. My 2 mortars killed all of those warp spiders. And because of that, Phil was able to take the Wave Serpent that was here, and he used Star Engines, and he rolled a 6. So this Wave Serpent, at the end of my shooting phase, went 21 inches and found itself, like, here. And I go, God damn it. I thought I was doing everything right. I hadn't killed any of his units so far in a time where he was able to do anything about it, where he was able to do anything cool with it. And suddenly now there's a Wave Serpent, which is able to put threat on the objective that's here and the objective that's here. And this has Howling Banshees and Fire Dragons in it. The Fire Dragons end up getting out, like, here. They do some damage to the Cadian Command Squad. And then the Howling Banshees come out here, and they charge into mortars. They kill the 2 mortars. They kill most of an engineer unit. They leave Kasrkin alive, and the Gaunt's ghosts are just, like, hanging out over here. So I'm never, like, losing this objective. But it means that I have to start committing resources. I dropped a unit of Aquilons here in order to use the like shoot on drop, and I think I killed like 2 fire dragons. And then I also used them to like overwatch. I think it was overwatch the Howling Banshees. I think, and I killed like 1 or 2 of them. But it was suddenly an issue where I was not worried that I was going to lose the game from this position, but I want to go back to the spot where you have to make sure you use an extra unit of Scions to make sure that the Incarn cannot come over. And so, in a moment when there's a unit of like Howling Banshees that are like hanging out here, there's a Wave Serpent, a couple of Fire Dragons. What I need to do is I need to devote 1 unit of Scions. 1 unit of Scions is going to like drop here to kill the Wave Serpent. The Kasrkin, who are still engaged, will have to fall back, and these will hop into the Wave Serpent. And because I have Assassinate, I have to make sure that the guys in this unit don't escape. So I had to drop a unit like Aquilons here in order to make sure that no matter where it goes, no matter where it jumps out of the Wave Serpent, I'll be able to take it up afterwards. But the problem is, I also need to devote another unit of Scions, like somewhere in here, to make whose entire job is to make sure that after I kill the Wave Serpent, after I kill the Howling Banshees, after I kill the Fire Dragons, that the Incarn is not allowed to teleport over here because I will kill it. And the problem this creates for me is I've lost so much time. I lost so much tempo on the board because I had to commit extra units to deal with his escapades on my side of the board. This is a game where normally I'm supposed to be the one creating pressure on his side of the board, but because he has now created this problem on my side, I'm going to end up with like a unit of Scions like here that I'll pick up, a unit of Scions here, a unit of Scions here. Like, they will be able to do things later in the game. They're going to be fine. They're going to do something. But unfortunately, the things that they're going to do are going to happen on turns 4 and 5 instead of turns 3 and 4, right? I lost an entire turn of movement. I lost an entire turn of shooting with 1 unit of Scions because it was not able to do anything. So that takes the game from being probably about a 12 to in the 10-ish range. Okay. Around turn 4, my coach, Chris, who was fantastic, and I really appreciate all the work that he was doing for us, comes over to me and whispers in my ear, Josh, you need to score. He told me the wrong number. He told me 12, but the number was actually 11. Everybody else on both teams was done, and if I could score 11 points, then we would win the match as a team. We go through. I set myself up to have 89 points. Phil, at the time, has 59 points. I'm currently up 30 points. And that means that Phil needs to score 25 points in order to actually get a draw. And I tell him this at this point, that he needs to get within 5 points of me in order to get a draw. If he is within 6 points of me, we're going to get the 11. My team is going to win. And let me show you what the situation was at the time. There is an objective somewhere in here. Here, I was only able to put 1 over here. There's an objective like here, here, an objective here. Something like this. Phil has a Wraith Lord around here. He has a Wraith Lord that is here, that is currently fighting with the remnants of my Cadian command squad. He has his indirect gun. He has the Incarn somewhere in here. And I have unit of Scions that are hanging out here. And then I also have, like, Creed or something here. And Phil draws Secure No Man's Land and Containment. And Secure No Man's Land is relatively easily, right? This comes in here. This comes in here. That's going to score 10 points immediately. for the ritual, and another 5 points for secure no man's land. The problem is containment. He can only do one of because the Incarn is not able to advance over here and do containment. It's the only unit that he could get to contain on this side of the board because over here, just this Wraith Lord is able to contain. So if he was able to do that, and then this Wraith Lord did enough damage to this, where he had enough OC on the point, he would get up to, he would get 15 on primary, plus 5 from Secure No Man's Land, plus 3 from 1 Contain. And this is 23 points. He needs to find 2 more points. So, we sit there, and I'm working with him as well, because you know, we were having a great game. We were very communicative the entire time. I tell him very directly, like, hey, this is what you need. You need to find a line that does this. I don't want to win because I have information about the game that my opponent, in theory, also has, right? It's trivial for his team. And I told him as well because we were running out on time on the clock. I think at this point I had like 30 seconds. He needed like 2 minutes at the end of his turn. And earlier in the game, I had said to him, or we had communicated to each other, like, I don't want, like, neither of us want to win because of the clock, because it's the last round of the tournament. If we will continue playing even after the clock is done until the TOs tell us hard dice down. And so, you know, we get to bottom of 5. I go, I turn off the clock for him and say, take your time, make sure you make the good moves until the TO comes over. I'm not going to worry about the clock at all. And you know, because we had agreed to this relatively early on, I was very happy to do this. Phil realized that the only way that he could get a draw from this position is he needed to redraw the card. He needed to redraw Containment, because Containment was going to be worth 3, Secure No Man's Land was going to be worth 5, and Secure No Man's Land was also easy to do. And so Phil goes ahead, spends his last CP, he draws Area Denial. And so the line that Phil ended up finding was this Wraith Lord could come and touch this objective. This Wraith Lord could go over here and try and make a charge. And the entire game came down to, could this Wraith Lord come over here and kill this unit and then end up within 3 inches of center? And he rolled his shots, he rolled his charge, he made it, and he ended up getting his 5 points on Area Denial. He found the 2 points that he needed in order to get an exact draw. Meaning that if I had found one more game point over this entire game, I would have been able to win my team the round 5. We could have shot up from 8th to, like, I think we would have been 4th or 5th. And you know what? I think there's ways I could have done it. I know there's ways I could have done it. But I don't care. I had a great time. Like, my opponent was a gem to play against. The game was so much fun. And we still walked away with the draw, right? Like, I walked away with a draw in my game. My team walked away with a draw overall. We ended up ending the tournament 3 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. And, like, that's all I can really ask for. We had a ton of fun. So I want to end with a couple of fun stats about this event. So the first one, like I mentioned, we were the 7th highest team by ELO at the event. We ended up placing 8th, which is pretty good, right? We are on matrix, as they say. However, my team played the 3rd hardest average placing of any team at the event. Only Making Saves Yellow, Making Saves White played a harder version of strength of schedule based on placings. We were also the 2nd. We played the 2nd hardest strength of schedule of any team at the event after XPZ Alpha for strongest team average by expected ELO. We were also tied for 1st in the hardest strength of schedule based on how many match wins your opponents got. So overall, we played one of the hardest brackets in the entire event, and we were still on Matrix. And honestly, that was a ton of fun, and I was super happy to have that happen. the last thing is I, of course, am very data driven, like I mentioned. Here are how all of my teammates did. So over the course of the event, Alejandro and his world leaders, he was projector score 56. He scored 73 for a total difference of 17. He did quite well above Matrix overall, but that probably means that his Matrix was, he probably could have been a bit more confident in the scores that he was saying that he could have gotten. I ended up I was projector score 58. I scored exactly 58. I did overall what I told my team I was going to do, and I never had a game that was more than plus or minus 3 from the Matrix, which is honestly, I'm very happy. It means that I made a very good Matrix, and I played to the Matrix. Uh, Beryl or Michael, he was projector score 64, scored 62, so he was, again, on Matrix. Ben, again, a little bit above Matrix, scored 5 above. And then Tomas, unfortunately, had that one game where he was like -9, -10 from the projection, which ended up putting him at a total of -5. But I showed this to a couple of my other friends. They're like, wow, that is an impressively consistent run from all of your team. Really good stuff overall. So very happy to play with the guys I end up playing with. So with that, anyway, that was California Team Championships. I had a lot of fun. Teams is definitely the most fun way to play 40K. I will be playing teams again at OC5s in like a month or so, and then I'll also be planning to go to the Charity Cup, which is just outside Las Vegas in a couple of weeks as well. So if you're going to go to that, make sure you say hi. But for now, this has been Josh Howard. We've been talking about the California Team Championships, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.